Hi everyone, I'm Cory Anotado, the executive producer of Tell Us About Yourself, conversations with game show contestants. Our first season has come to a close, and our host Christian Carrion is taking a well-deserved break. He'll be back in the new year with new episodes of the podcast. Meanwhile, I'll be replaying some of our favorite episodes, giving you a chance to listen again to some of the greatest stories we have from the stars of your favorite game shows, the contestants. We couldn't do this without your help, so we appreciate you listening and supporting the podcast. We also could not have done this without the support of the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play. The National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong preserves the history of game shows, from the earliest panel shows and quiz scandals, to the games and puzzles of the 1970s, to the Big Money Network series, and the classic games now in prime time. You can learn more about the archives or the museum itself at their website, museumofplay.org. We would also appreciate if you visited our Patreon page. You can support the podcast for as little as $1 per month. You can check that out and more at patreon.com/packdo. Now, without further ado, here's an encore episode of Tell Us About Yourself, conversations with game show contestants.
Tell us about yourself, would you?
Tell us something about you.
For any new viewers, won't you tell us again about yourself?
We've met before, but let's meet again. Tell us about
What
yourself.
else can you tell us about yourself?
Perhaps you'd fill us in again and tell us about yourself.
I'm Christian Carrion. In the world of game shows, my guest tonight needs no introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. In 1980, Thom McKee had been married for only 7 months when he made it onto Tic Tac Dough as a contestant. Tic Tac Dough, the popular game show of the 70s and 80s, hosted by Wink Martindale. Little did Wink, Thom, or the show's millions of viewers know that initial appearance would be the beginning of an 88-game winning streak. Thom appeared on 46 episodes of Tic Tac Dough, won 8 cars, over $300,000 in cash and prizes, and set a world record for game show winnings that wouldn't be beaten until the days of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It was an unprecedented feat in the 80s, and Thom is here tonight to tell us about his experiences as a legendary Tic Tac Dough contestant. Thom, welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself.
My name is Thom McKee. I was born and raised in western upstate New York, graduate of the Naval Academy, flew F-14s, have been married for 43 years to the loveliest woman on the planet, and I have 3 grown sons, Jonathan, Michael, and Travis, of whom I'm very proud. In 1980, I was a contestant on Tic Tac Dough and set what was at that time the world record for game show winnings.
So, Thom, one of the first things I ask when I talk to contestants for this project is what role game shows played in their life growing up before they became a contestant. And I've gotten a wide variety of responses to that question. Some people are in a very casual way into game shows and looked at it as a way to make some side money. There are people like me and other people who I've talked to who live for it. And, game shows have made those people who they are. Where did game shows fall for you before you became a contestant?
I had watched Jeopardy as a kid, and this was the old Art Fleming version. And it was, for me, it was a regular thing. We always look forward to playing the game, answering the questions. And it was I think, a big part of my life growing up because I just enjoyed them so much. I loved trivia. When I was at the Naval Academy, I had hosted a radio show that was a trivia show. We would play songs, and in between the songs, we would ask questions. And this was just almost purely a Navy station. It didn't go, it wasn't strong enough to go very far outside the yard. But from, like I said, from my earliest days, I always had a God-given memory for innocuous facts.
And so game shows are something that you had an entry point into by way of the Navy. You hosted a trivia show. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, this was a good friend of mine, lived in the next company over, a guy named Frank Cherubino. I think he's a writer down in Miami now, but Frank and I would as seniors, it was always the privilege of the seniors to do this. There was the show that we ended up hosting, and it was, again, general knowledge stuff, and I generally put the questions together, but Frank was my sidekick of sorts, kind of like Ed McMahon to Johnny Carson in a way. But it was fun just putting questions together and then trying to stump all my friends, because they generally, the guys that I knew listened to the show. And it was basic stuff. I mean, I wouldn't say it was terribly deep, but it was whatever the spirit moved me to put down for a question. So, and as my mother told Wink Martindale one time, when I was always glad that she got to come and sit during a taping of the show. I used to read encyclopedias on the John when I was a kid. That was started through A, went through Z, and then started over again. So I had a good source for all sorts of otherwise useless information.
So that love of knowledge and trivia extends way back.
Yes, most definitely.
Was it a love of knowledge more than a love of game shows? Was Jeopardy with Art Fleming a sort of entry point into that interest for you, or did you just love it, period?
I think I just loved it, period. I still play trivia every Wednesday night whenever I can with my middle son. We go to a town about 15, 20 minutes further west of where I am in Howard County, Maryland, and we play trivia. And it's funny because 3 weeks ago, I was not able to attend. And I was one of the questions that they have this halftime puzzle page. and I had this, I was actually one of the questions. And so this guy who is our arch nemesis, he's on this team. They're very, very good. They have, they've got a very good depth of knowledge on their team. He came up to me and he asked me for my autograph, and I got the biggest kick out of that, because I don't think beforehand anyone had really recognized me or cared about it really. But I kind of got a kick out of that, Christian, to be honest.
Well, I have to tell you, on the subject of people caring about it, when I announced that I was going to be able to talk to you for this podcast, I got hundreds of messages from people looking forward to hearing about where you are now and what you thought of the experience. And going back to something that you said before we started recording, you said, I never mind talking about this. And one of the things that I found in common with the people that I've talked to for the show, and myself included, because I've been on a few shows myself, it never gets old. It's never not fun to talk about your experience being a contestant on a game show. And it is, like you said as well before we started recording, it's life-changing. Not only what you can win, but just the experience and getting that rush of acceptance and victory and a little bit of, I was starstruck, the shows that I was on, that never gets old. That feeling is always fun to talk about.
Yes, definitely. When we first, and I've told this story before, the way I even thought to get on a game show is a classmate in my F-14 RAG class, which is where the RAG is the squadron in which you learn to fly the aircraft that you're going to fly in the fleet. So we didn't fly on weekends. This was shore based, so it was Monday through Friday. It was rare to work on weekends. And this guy had gone up and been on the Joker's Wild. and he won 4,900 bucks. And he came down and back and said, hey, you guys ought to look at doing this, because this was 1980, and we were just starting to get over the whole Vietnam malaise, and it was the military was kind of starting to come back into fashion, and I thought, what the heck, because Jenny and I didn't have 2 cents to rub together. We were trying to buy a house, VA nothing down, and we made a phone call, went up, got the meeting, you got the appointment to take the general knowledge test, took the test, and they wanted us to go on. It was a couples show, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, but Jenny, under no certain terms, was not going on a game show. She had no desire to do it. She'd just gone up and taken the test because we had nothing else to do. So you had to tell them no. And I was a little bit disappointed, more than disappointed. I was a little bit torqued, because it's like, wait, this is our big chance to make some money. And they said, oh, okay, well, how do you like to go on Tic Tac Dough? And that was honestly what I had intended the whole time, because I knew that there was no limit to the number of times you could go on. Unlike the old days on Jeopardy, when it was a 2-week limit, you got to go on as long as you kept winning.
That's right.
So that was really what my intention was from the outset, and it worked out pretty well for us.
Yeah, they were advertising the show back when it premiered, because it was a reboot of the one from the 50s, and they had advertised it as the Fort Knox of game shows, because it was, limitless winnings. And Thom, you were on the show at an interesting time in game shows period, because like you said, the military was sort of on its way back, and a lot of shows, The Price is Right is the first one that comes to mind. They loved having servicemen and women in uniform on the show. They loved the sight of it. And I think game shows in general just loved to have that image as part of their show. So I imagine that was a boon for you as well.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And it's funny you mentioned The Price is Right, because again, I watched, you'd look forward to being sick when you were a kid, because you could sit there and watch all these shows that you couldn't otherwise see. I would watch Let's Make a Deal, the new, whatever. I watched them all. I think I even watched The Dating Game at times, which is surprises me now, but it was fun. Game shows. It's funny to watch different game shows in different countries. Yeah, and I'm sure you've done this. I'm positive you have.
Sure.
There's the Hispanic game shows. There's Japanese game shows. They're all different, and they're such a part of I should say, a reflection of the culture. And I think that trivia per se is, I don't want to say it's uniquely American, but it's certainly I think emblematic of us as a country. This thirst for knowledge and to be able to come up with answers to questions like that. I think it's uniquely American.
Oh, for sure. That spirit of competition, I think, as well, is something that's sort of ingrained in that. And going back to your point about foreign shows, I actually talked about this a few weeks ago with another contestant who also is interested in foreign adaptations of some of our game shows. And what's interesting is that they may have their own different spin on the formats or the presentation, or it might sound different or look different. But at the end of the day, that competition, that language is universal. No matter what language you speak, when somebody wins, when somebody is not sure what to do next and needs advice, when somebody loses. And that, to me, is fascinating about some of those foreign shows.
Yep. It's funny. You mentioned how it was good for me on in the Navy. The Navy had a huge boost in terms of recruiting when I was on the show, and the chief of naval operations wrote me a nice note expressing his appreciation, and he would get a weekly briefing from the chief of information. And it would be always conclude with, and Lieutenant McKee is up to X number of dollars. And the deputy chief of naval operations, a guy named Wes McDonald, he flew out to Miramar one time in the middle of the show, and he pulls up to the tower, and I'm ordered to report. This is the tower that was there in Top Gun and all this stuff. I'm told to report to the tower, and I'm lined up. There's the admiral, the skipper of the base, and then all of the various squadron commanding officers. And then at the end of the line, there's me. So Wes McDonald taxis up in his F-14, climbs out in his flight gear, comes over, says hi to the admiral, says hi to the skipper of the base, and then he walks past all the squadron COs down to me and says hi to me. And I remember thinking at the time, Christian, this could be not interpreted in the kindest terms if any of these guys got their hackles up. So.
Sure, that's very true. What a surreal experience that must be. And it's funny talking about this now. We've experienced so many different sort of ups and downs in the history of game shows, and these big money shows that came in the early 2000s. It seemed like every week there was a new biggest winner in TV history. And these days it almost doesn't seem like that big a deal that somebody wins $1 million on TV. It seems sort of par for the course that that's what a game show gives away. But when this happened in 1980, this was an enormous deal. And I think before you, the biggest cash winner in game shows was somebody from, the quiz shows of the 50s who won about $250,000. I think his name was Teddy Nadler, was on like the $64,000 challenge and won like $250,000.
I believe you are correct.
And that's the guy that you beat. And so that record had stood for almost 2 decades before you came through. Let's talk about what you remember about the audition process for Tic Tac Dough. What do you remember about? Was there a test? Was there some sort of interview? How did you find yourself getting accustomed to that process?
The test was 75 questions long, 3 questions each on, I think, 25 different subjects, to the best of my recollection. After that, if you passed the test, then you were invited back for a series of interviews and a mock game. And they really wanted to see how you perform in front of a camera, simulated camera, obviously. But that really was it. And then after that, you got a call to come up to CBS Television City and just wait to see whether or not you'd get on the show based on how many contestants they used. And the process was actually pretty quick. I don't remember it as being at all stressful, but I think in large part that's honest to goodness because of my time at the Naval Academy and going through flight training. It's when you do a certain number of incredibly stressful things and have to perform them promptly under duress, answering questions on a game show kind of pales in comparison.
Sure, I can imagine. I can imagine, sure. Well, also, your experience hosting that trivia show, I imagine, did something to strengthen your ability to, quote unquote, perform. There are a lot of people who are really good at general knowledge, really good at trivia, but if you put them in a game show audition, they falter when it comes to the mock game, to knowing how to act on camera. So I imagine that experience helped a little bit, didn't it?
Oh no, without a doubt. I was very comfortable. I was never uncomfortable, never have been uncomfortable in front of a microphone. I don't, at least not on the game show, or for example, talking with you. I'm not 100% comfortable doing public speaking. I've done it. I do tend to get a little bit more nervous giving a speech than I do talking about things like this or being on the camera. It's different. It's different, but it definitely helps. The other thing I remember was they mentioned that I think it was an LA city councilman had gone on and he was bomb. He was a bomb, and it hurt the guy's political standing that he did so poorly in front of the camera on the game show. So that was one of the things that they mentioned when they were going through the interview process.
Talking about being comfortable in front of a microphone versus being not so comfortable in a public speaking type setting, is the method that you use to be comfortable in front of a microphone something that you could verbalize? Is there a way that you think about that that might be of benefit to somebody listening who might not be comfortable speaking in front of a microphone? How do you do it?
It's a good question. I think the secret, at least my secret, to being comfortable in front of a microphone is just thinking of it as you're talking to your mom or a close friend. You're just having a conversation, and conversations for most people are easy. I've spoken, for example, a couple times in front of the church for various things, given a missions report or a Memorial Day or a Veterans Day, a little 5-minute talk, and that's different. And I think that the way that I do try to overcome that is, again, just pretend that you're talking to a good friend or mom. So that to me is the way that I get comfortable doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And especially, I'm somebody who has idolized many broadcasters over the years. I love TV, I love game shows, I love all of this. And so I have found that the most effective broadcasters are the ones who speak to you as if you're the only person they're speaking to. That one-to-one connection makes for really good broadcasting and really good communication in that setting.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a truism. I had the honor of meeting Merv Griffin, and Merv's nephew, a guy named Mike Ayer. I think he may still be running, or at least a very, very senior position at Merv Griffin Productions. Mike was one of my instructors going through the F-14 rag, and Uncle Buddy, as he referred to him, would always come when they came back from cruise. He threw a party for the squadron when they came back from cruise, and Merv was a very accomplished private pilot. And Mike talked to Uncle Buddy, and he invited us to come up to do a show. So Jenny and I went up, and we were backstage. It was, let's see, Hal Lindsey from Hal Linden from Barney Miller. Hal Linden, Brian Kerwin, I think, he was the deputy on Sheriff Lobo. He was there, and then there was this blonde girl that I can't recall her name, but we went out first, which was kind of a surprise because I think Hal Linden expected that he would. And we sat there with Merv, and it was like he was Uncle Buddy. I mean, he was just the nicest, most genuine individual, and he made you feel 100% comfortable. And he asked us if we had ever sat through an entire show, and said no, and he invited us to do so, and so that's what we did. And it was a very, very, very nice experience, very memorable for me.
How wonderful. Yeah, Merv Griffin's one of the greats. That's an amazing story.
Yep, he was.
Wow.
He was. So anyway,
yeah. So let's talk about how all of these skills and all of this general knowledgeability, and you passed the test, you did the audition, it all comes together. You become a contestant on Tic Tac Dough, and you step out on the stage for the first, but would absolutely not be the last time. And I wonder if you could verbalize for me what your feelings were heading into that first, not necessarily the first game, but just that first experience of hearing your name being called by the announcer and making eye contact with the camera during that intro, when you first step out on stage. What was all of that like?
I took one deep breath and just kind of let it out slow and went out. And I just remember Wink asking how long I'd been married, and I responded, 7 wonderful months, Wink, because that was the response that Dan Enright wanted me to give, the script, the scripted response. And after that, we just went right into the game, and I kind of just immersed myself in the game at that point. Didn't really, honest to goodness, Christian, and I don't know if you were the same. I never even noticed the cameras. It's like they weren't there. I was looking at Wink, and I was looking at my opponent, and everything else just kind of faded.
Yep.
It was just in the background. And I remember the hardest thing for me to do on that show, because I won't ever pretend that the questions on Tic Tac Dough were as tough as the questions on Jeopardy. One thing I learned is there is no question harder than one you don't know the answer to.
Sure, of course.
And nothing easier than the one you do. So I remember playing one time in this Wednesday night thing, and they asked what European city OPEC, or no, I'm sorry, not what European city, what city OPEC was based in. And out of 12 teams, I was the only one that knew the answer. So I guess it was a tough question, but then again, it wasn't if you knew what the answer was. So the thing I had to do was to focus on what Wink was saying and try to empty my mind of extraneous thoughts. I just focus on what the question was, versus getting distracted by anything else that was going on around you.
Sure. And I can relate to that for sure. The cameras and everything do seem to fade away. And, and I think that's what's behind a lot of the over-the-top reactions you might see from somebody on a game show. Not only the excitement, but, if you knew there were 3 cameras on you and you were an excitable contestant, would you act that way? You know what I mean? And
right. No, that's a good point. I remember the first and only time when I had my first win, I think we went to at least 3 ties, but the first lady that I beat, I trotted across the stage, and you know what? I said to myself, I'm in uniform. That's not very dignified. And so I never did it again. I would just walk. I know Dan wanted you to run and act excited, and it just kind of struck me that, that's just, I'm wearing the uniform. I don't know that that's appropriate. So, but I will never forget that, being, as you said, the first time they call your name, that's like, here we go. And then after that, it was just, and I'm sure you're the same way, it was just fun. I mean, playing the game was fun. And at some point, you got so comfortable that, and I always try to do this regardless, I'd be more worried about making the person that just came out on stage as my next opponent comfortable than worrying about me. Because there was one guy at the end of the first season, we had a 2.5 month hiatus. And this guy was a nice guy. I mean, I met him backstage, and he was very nice. All the contestants were, but he was so nervous, he could barely spit out his name. And I just remember thinking to myself, I got to try to help this guy get comfortable, because he's not going to look good. And it turned out that was the last intro. We broke for the summer, and he took a job teaching in Japan. Not because I think he didn't want to go on the game show. I just think he was afforded a unique opportunity, and so it didn't have to go up against him. But anyway, I know exactly what you're feeling when you're out there and you just want to get going.
Yeah, the fun just takes over. That's I mean, that's the mark of a great game show, right? It's fun. At the end of the day, it has to be fun for the people playing and for the people watching.
Yep.
You touched on something that I want to expand on a bit. Now, it's only a certain number of people that I've been able to talk to for this series that have worked with Jack Barry and Dan Enright, who in the 70s and 80s were a powerhouse of game show production. They were, prolific in the 50s until the quiz show scandals. They took some time, worked in Canada, sort of under the radar, and then came back with The Joker's Wild. And all of a sudden, they had all these formats and all these shows, and Tic Tac Dough being one of them, or Tic Tac Dough, rather, being one of them. I would love to hear about the extent to which Dan Enright, because it sounds like Dan was the one who was in charge of sort of telling you, I won't say how to act, but sort of guiding you through what he wanted from you as a contestant slash performer. How much how much influence did he have on what you said and what you did that wasn't related to the gameplay?
I think at first very little. I know that he had I remember he had input on what we said when we were introduced. By the way, John Barry, who was Jack's son, was the director of Tic Tac Dough. Jack, Dan was the line producer, but later on he got more involved as things developed because it became a big deal, and I think he wanted to script things a little bit more, not in a bad way by any stretch, but he just at some point they recognized what was going on and they wanted to make maximum they wanted the maximum effect. They wanted to make things as perfect as they could be for the circumstances.
Sure, they had a vested interest in making sure you always had something to say.
Yeah, yes. And then, you know what, honest to goodness, Christian, you've probably already noticed I'm not generally at a loss for words. I'll talk your ear off. But they in that format, there were things that they wanted to have come out, and but it was never uncomfortable. I never felt like they were trying to make me do things or say things that I wouldn't otherwise naturally say. So it was Dan was very, very good to us. He as things progressed, he wouldn't make me go through the warm-ups and the walkthrough with everybody. Not that I didn't interact with the other contestants, that wasn't it. I just sit out in the audience. The audience wasn't in there yet, but I would sit out in the seats with him, and he would always watch the walkthroughs. So things got a little bit easier, but I never got Wink and I didn't interact until after the fact, which was, I think, in recognition of the potential for even a hint of scandal. We were, for example, we were escorted to the bathroom. They walk us down the hall. This escort would poke their head in, make sure nobody's in there. They'd let us go in, stand outside the door, and then they walk us back to the green room. So Dan was very, very aware of making sure that there was not only not scandal, but not even a hint of scandal.
That's wonderful to hear. I've heard from various other contestants that Dan was just a really sweet guy. He was a genuinely good guy to work with.
Yes. Yep. I would emphatically agree. He was always very, very nice to us. And again, hey, listen, no two ways about it. He made some money off of us, but we made some money off of him. Somebody once said to me, asked about whether Dan had a problem with us winning. And I think at one point, Jenny thought that maybe it was like, okay, how long is this going to go on? And it's like, are you crazy? They were the #1 rated game show on television.
Oh yeah.
Think about that. They're going to give that money away no matter what. They don't care who it goes to. And if they're going to be able to charge advertisers, more money for their time, for their slots during the show, that benefits Dan in a big way.
Oh, it's absolutely the best thing that could happen to a game show. Look at Jeopardy these days. When somebody wins 10, 15, 20 games in a row, Jeopardy is the #1 show in syndication because people love seeing that.
Yep. And the thing is that now that works, that that's a two-edged sword. That people might also think, well, then it was in Dan's vested interest for you to get the answers. And I think that, well, I know we, A, didn't need them, B, didn't get them. And I think the only time Jenny and I, we bought a Guinness Book of World Records, or maybe it wasn't, anyway, it was a trivia book. And I can't remember if it was Guinness or not, but we're driving up to LA one Saturday morning, and she's asking me questions. She's reading questions or asking questions out of this book, and it was the longest river in Canada, and that was the Mackenzie. Now, it just so happened that on the show that day, that was one of the questions. So that was the only time I think I picked up an extraneous piece of information and then was able to use it.
Amazing. Thom,
Yeah.
let's talk about statistics here. 88 games. You missed, out of the 385 questions you were asked, you missed 32 of them. And the 88 games spanned 46 episodes. That's an amazing record. And even in terms of total wins, I don't know that Ken Jennings has even surpassed you.
Ken had 75, if memory serves.
Right. And then if you include some of the specials, I guess it will bring it up, but those aren't,
Oh, heavens, yeah.
aren't consecutive. Yeah.
Hey, listen, I was on a show when Ken was on his run. They invited me to come up and do cold pizza up in New York, and I told him I would go as long as I could bring my youngest son with me.
Oh, was that so the show on ESPN?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And I just wanted Travis to, I tried to get the boys to do something special with me, and this was his thing. So it was fun, but the question was asked, how I felt about Ken breaking my records. And it's like, records are made to be broken. If the idea that the millionaire shows, I mean, come on, one show and a guy won 3 times as much money as I won, more than 3 times. So for Ken, there is absolutely there are people that I've met over the years that might have done what Ken did, given the opportunity to go beyond 2 weeks on Jeopardy. There's no way of knowing, obviously, but these are people that were very, very gifted in terms of trivia. I don't want to confuse knowledge of trivia with rocket science. They're different things, but Ken did it. And he is without question the greatest game show contestant in terms of his performance ever. There's the guy, I'm trying to remember his name, the gambler.
Holzhauer, James Holzhauer.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I would love to have seen Ken use his style. It would have been something to see.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Ken was just a powerhouse, but and Ken wagered liberally, but I think that James blows him out of the water in that regard because he was a professional poker player.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think if Ken had wagered like he did, he'd have won twice as much as he did. Maybe, there's, like you said, there's no way of knowing, but yeah, there's just, I've had the chance to meet him and a couple of times, and we had dinner together in DC, our wives, and he's a genuinely nice guy, very bright, and obviously very, very, very good memory.
Sure. Wonderful. Thom, was there a moment in that period of time that you were the champion on Tic Tac Dough? Was there a particular moment that you realized what a big deal this run was? Was there anyone who had gotten in touch with you, maybe from the media, maybe not, was there any moment that you realized this is a bigger deal than I ever anticipated?
I would say we went up the first time on a Sunday and didn't get on. And so it was like, I think a few weeks till the next taping. And we went up and we're driving home that night and we just won $29,000 in obviously cash and prizes. But that in and of itself was just incredible. It was such a blessing. But I think that I got to think, Christian, I don't even know if I knew as things were progressing what the world record was. And I think that at that time, obviously, I think that at one point, somebody in the production staff brought the subject up. And I don't know that I had really even thought about that. You don't ever go out thinking that, hey, yeah, I'm gonna break the world record for game show winnings. But I would say that when we got to the summer break and it was still going, I think that's when it really hit me that, you know what, this is something special. I went out that summer in between. So people, because there was the delay, Christian, in terms of the taping and the broadcast. And so it hadn't really been that public at that point that this was all going on. And it was over that summer that it really, really struck home. I was out doing my carrier qualifications. And the way this worked is you would go out, you had a set time that your particular aircraft would go down and do your practice landings. And I'm up at what they called high holding, which is 20,000 feet orbiting above the USS Ranger. And the guy the guy on the radio down in combat, the CIC Combat Information Center, comes up over the radio, and we're just drilling holes in the sky, waiting, and he comes up, says, "Hey, we'll let you down early for a Buick." And I don't think anybody else up there really realized what he meant by that.
Sure.
And so we end up finally getting down, and I'm at the 180 about to start my turn, and for my approach for landing, and I hear over the radio that says A6 in the groove, which meant this guy was very close to touching down. Wave it off, wave it off, wave it off. So the A6 waves it off. We keep coming, and I'm looking at the deck trying to figure out what the problem was that they waved this guy off, and nothing happens. We trap, and as we're taxiing out of the wires, we're told over the radio to pull up to the island, shut down, and report to CIC. So we do what we're told, walk down, and here is the ops officer who I had known at Miramar. He was the skipper of my brother-in-law's squadron, VF2. He was now the OPSO, and it was the 225,000th arrested landing on the Ranger. So this was a milestone of sorts. They had a cake, and this guy, Moon Mullen was his name. Captain Mullen had waved this A6 off so that I could get the landing.
That's amazing.
So we got
the clout that Tic Tac Dough brought you. That's wonderful.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's those sorts of little things that just happen because of being on the game show.
Ken Jennings, we talked about him briefly. In recent years, it's sort of come to light that Alex Trebek was a fan of Ken Jennings as a person. He sort of they got to know each other. They spent time together. They worked on projects together. I would love to know what your relationship, if there was any, with Wink Martindale was like after you had won all the games on this show. Had you spent time with him after the show? What kind of relationship, if any, did you experience with Wink Martindale?
Wink and I and his wife Sandy and Jenny are still friends. He moved to Palm Springs from Calabasas a few years ago, and we still stay in contact. I come out to California on a regular basis, and there's a golf tournament that I play in out there in the north part of the city, and they have a wine tasting event every Friday night, and Wink and Sandy have come to that a number of times. So we still stay in touch. I think the first thing he did, as I mentioned earlier, he couldn't really interact with us when we were on the show. I'm sure that Trebek and Ken were the same way, but he invited us out to dinner afterwards. And so that was the first time we got to spend real time with him of a personal nature. And we've just stayed in touch over the years. He was I mean, there's a lot of great game show hosts. I think Wink was unique, but I won't say he was better. I'll just say he was unique. You know, he was very close friends with Elvis, and he had been a DJ in Memphis. He was born in Jackson, Tennessee, and had started off very, very early as a DJ in Memphis, and he happened to run into a very young Elvis Presley. And in fact, his second wife, his wife Sandy, actually dated Elvis at one point. So I can't say enough good about Wink and Sandy.
That's excellent. That's so wonderful to hear. And I bet in that time, you know, because 46 episodes, 88 games, that's a lot of time. And knowing Wink after the fact and knowing him and being able to be friends with him even to this day, I bet you get to learn a lot about the man behind the microphone, behind the game show persona. One of the things I'm fascinated with as an adult is the fact that game show hosts aren't who they are on camera all the time. They are people like us when the camera isn't on, and they have their, you know, the things that frustrate them, you know, the things they look forward to, the things that they want to achieve in their life. They're regular people.
Yep. And I would say, I will say this, Wink is as nice off camera as he was on camera. Now he obviously would I don't want to say act goofy. That's not the right word. He would I think kind of affect a certain personality, maybe over exuberance at times when he was hosting, but he was every bit as nice off camera as he was on, and he was very nice on camera. Jenny, you know, he would talk with Jenny when we were off, either backstage or whatever, and he was just a great guy. I think he is the quintessential game show host. He's the kind of person that people would think about when you think about a game show host. It reminded me. Did you ever see Ghostbusters?
Oh yeah, I sure have.
I remember the line Sigourney Weaver used talking to Bill Murray. She said to him, "You're more like you don't act like a scientist. You're more like a game show host." And Bill Murray, and you know, being the game show host always makes me think of Wink.
Right. Yeah, Wink is like the archetype of that type of host for sure.
Yeah. Yep. And again, you know, Trebek was different. It was a different format. It was a different type of show, and he was a different type of game show host. I always laughed at the fact that he would, when he did the Saturday Night Live thing, and he actually came out and did the thing with Will Ferrell, I always got a kick out of that.
Oh yeah, that was wonderful. Oh man, those sketches when I was in high school. Well, friend of mine, this is back when making your own DVDs was like a new thing. You could burn your own discs, and he made one of all the Celebrity Jeopardy sketches, and we passed that around for like 2 or 3 years. We got so much joy out of those. They were so funny.
Oh, Daryl Hammond was. I mean, it it just still you just laugh and just thinking about some of them. They were so funny. I mean, they were rather raunchy at times, but anyway,
Sure,
they were awful funny.
absolutely. Thom, one of the greatest moments in game show history, just in terms of gameplay and in terms of excitement and in terms of just sheer magnitude, is your final game. Is the game where Eric Kripalian defeated you again after 88 successful wins. I would love to know where you were at that moment. What did that feel like? I know that when you shook Eric's hand, you had mentioned that you felt a sense of relief, that it was finally over and that you knew what's done was done and you didn't have to defend this championship anymore. I would love for you to expand on some of those feelings that you had in that moment.
Yeah, first, Eric was a great guy, and he was a computer programmer, and he had asked me. I had mentioned on one of the shows that I was going to tithe my winnings to my brother, among other church sources, who was a missionary over in Africa. And he was working at the time, he's retired now, but he was with Wycliffe Bible Translators. And Eric asked me about that. And son of a gun, if he didn't send some money to my brother. So that I have to note.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Wow.
really, 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 really nice thing for him to do. I think that, first, it was relief of a sort. I've never liked to lose. Jenny and I play a board game called Sequence every morning, and we
Love Sequence. Love Sequence.
Oh, I mean, literally, Christian. It's we I work out of the house, and so we play every morning, and neither one of us. She'll never admit this, but she doesn't like to lose either. And so even at Sequence, I don't like losing. So I wasn't really happy about losing, but I knew it had to happen someday, and some game. And frankly, the question that I missed was one of those where I can still remember to this day. This beautiful actress starred in The Wind and the Lion and Getting Straight, and was nominated for an Oscar for her role in Starting Over. Now, I knew that The Wind and the Lion had Sean Connery and Candice Bergen in it, but the first thing that came into my mind was not The Wind and the Lion, but The Lion in Winter. And I could not get I could not get Katharine Hepburn out of my mind. And that was the answer I gave, even though I knew it was wrong. I just, it was one of those things where in 4 seconds you can't always clear your mind.
It's funny how the brain works too, because Katharine Hepburn and Candice Bergen almost sound the same if you kind of squint with your ears a little bit. They almost sound the same.
And it's one of those things. But it was a certain sense of relief. But it was also I think it was gratitude. I was just thankful to God for giving me the opportunity and for allowing us to do what we did and win what we did, and just to have the experience. I don't think it's curious. I never asked Ken that question. I'd love to know what he thinks or he felt, but it was just. It was an appreciation for being able to do what we did versus what we didn't do, if that makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Grateful for the opportunity and even, even for that moment, even for the loss, you have to exercise some sort of gratitude, even for that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not like anybody's going to do it forever. And I was grateful that Eric went on. I think he won $92,000 and change. So it wasn't like he went on and then lost the next game. He did very well. He did very well.
Thom, I may leave this in and I might not, but I want to tell you a quick story about the board game Sequence. I learned how to play Sequence in college from a girlfriend that I had. Her family had played the game for forever, and I learned how to play it, and I loved it. And I found a copy at Goodwill for $3, and it stayed in my house for years and years and years. 2010, I went to a music festival in Tennessee, and my car broke down on the way back. We ended up having to sell the car for scrap to buy Greyhound tickets back to Connecticut. And I remember the night we were waiting for our bus, we were out of money, we were out of food. All I had with me were my clothes in a garbage bag and a copy of Sequence. And I won the money that I used to buy my friend and I dinner that night by playing strangers in games of Sequence at the bus station in Nashville, Tennessee. So that game is very near and dear to my heart.
Oh, that is hilarious.
It was a time. It felt horrible then, but looking back, it's talk about grateful for an experience. That was so much fun in a very unique sort of way.
Oh, that's hilarious. I'll have to tell Jenny that one when she gets home. Well, I'll tell you a quick Nashville story. So when I got out of the service, we lived in Atlanta, and I did sales calls all over the Southeast, and Nashville was in my territory. And so I was going to the big Avco facility that made the wings for the C5 Galaxy. And I'm on Briley Parkway in Nashville, and I get this gentleman, older gentleman, pulls out in front of me, and I T-boned him, and kind of got banged up a little bit on the steering wheel. But they took me to the hospital, and I'm on a gurney being pushed into the emergency room. And this nurse looks down at me. So here I am, I'm upside down looking at, obviously my head is closest to her. And she looks down and she says, "You're Thom McKee, aren't you?" she had watched Tic Tac Dough. And I'm thinking to myself, seriously? This was like how many years? It had to be 6 years after Tic Tac Dough. But yeah, she remembered.
That's amazing. And moments like that, I mean, no matter how often they happen, they have to feel surreal. I would love to quickly talk about the attention that you got after you were defeated on the show and you were no longer on. What kind of attention were you getting from the media, from people on the street, from friends, from loved ones? What was that like for you? I imagine it had to have been a circus at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we experienced a very small slice of what real celebrities go through. I can't even imagine what it would be like trying to go out and just have a normal dinner. If let's say you were Tom Cruise, for example, he probably doesn't do it. I mean, we would go out because San Diego was a Navy town, and we'd go out to dinner, and people would come up and want to talk to you. And I don't think that we were ever rude about it, because I appreciated that they'd want to say hi. But I can't imagine somebody who's like I said, a really, really recognized presence, having to go through that. I'll tell you a quick story. You'll like this. We couldn't take the trips, and I can't remember how many we had total, but it was in the low 20s, I think. So Dan generously put a special trip together where we'd go to Hawaii for 2.5 weeks. And we had a puppy at the time. We had a Cocker Spaniel, Muffin. So we took Muffin to a lady to watch her while we were gone. And when we got back, it was foggy, and we got lost trying to find this place in the hills of Escondido. the California roads, they don't generally go in grid patterns up in the hills. So we stopped at this house, and Jenny went to the door and knocked on the door, and she was going to try to either use the phone, get directions, whatever. And the lady comes to the door, and Jenny starts asking her, and she says, "You're Jenny, aren't you?" And she invites us in. Here's her retired Navy husband who had just had his leg amputated, and they're calling the neighbors. And that is the best story I can tell you to indicate the attention we got.
Amazing. Instant celebrity. And again, it's lost on a lot of people these days who didn't grow up watching Tic Tac Dough or aren't familiar with how popular that show was. But it was a huge deal, and nobody knows that better than you.
Yep. And it was as I said, it faded over time, especially once we moved out of San Diego. But there's still there's still people that remember, which kind of amazes me. I had the honor of being inducted into the Game Show Hall of Fame, and then the next year was asked to introduce Wink, one of two people, and it was nice to see the folks that were very supportive. I don't think we ever ran into. There might have been one or two people that were negative, and I don't want to attribute it to jealousy, but that's probably what it was. But by and large, everybody was so supportive and rooting for you. It was just a great experience. We got to do something that very few people get to do, and it's like, as we said at the beginning, it was a life-changing experience that came out of nowhere. Not one of those things where you ever anticipated that it was something we were going to do.
Well, speaking about being pleased that people remember your run on Tic Tac Dough and people like hearing about it, just reading a couple of comments on the post here where I announced that I would be able to talk to you for this podcast. Let's see here, the name of the game is Tic Tac now because Thom left with all the dough. I don't know if you've ever heard that one before. A lot of people, a super champ before being a super champ was even a thing. He's a legend. I mean, people really, especially in the game show world, these people really have an interest in it because it was, again, just a feat unlike any other, in that period of time. Let's talk about the winnings. $312,700 is the final total that I have here, and it's cash and prizes. First of all, the cars. Now, for every 5 games that you won, you were rewarded with a car. I don't know that they ever expected anyone to win as many games as you did, but first of all, how did all those cars get delivered to you? How does that happen?
So the first and foremost, the state of California charged us not only tax on our income, but tax on the they made us pay separate tax on the cars, and so they hit you coming and going. The 6 Buicks were delivered to Peck Buick in San Diego, and the guy he's since passed, but Charlie Peck was. Whoever gives car dealers a bad name, it wasn't Charlie Peck, because he was honest as the day is long. He bought them from us, and in between the time the cars were ordered and delivered, there was a price increase, and it was $900 a car, and he gave us an extra $5,400. So I would do business with that gentleman any day of the week. So he took delivery of the 6 Buicks, and then he had to sell them as used cars. but we did a promotion, he ran an ad and I posed for the, some pictures and that sort of stuff. The two Chevys, the Chevettes, one girl, they came in through a local Chevy dealer, and then one was bought by a young lady up in North County who had there had been heavy rains and there was flooding, and she lost most of her house and her car. So she bought the one, and the other I sold to the brother of a guy I flew with. So that's how we disposed of those.
Wow. I always wondered how, I've won a large sofa, and they delivered that to me in a big box truck about 4 months after I was on The Price is Right. But I always wondered how a contestant gets that many cars in their possession at the same time.
Well, the Buicks literally came in on a car carrier. They came in all together, and
what a feeling!
It was
That's amazing. Wow. And I would love to know, Thom, how these winnings, particularly the cash winnings, how they affected yours and Jenny's life up to that point. I know that you were married for 7 months by the time you had started the show. By the time you'd lost, you were celebrating a year anniversary. And so I'd love to know what the winnings on Tic Tac Dough did for you as a couple. That had to have been life-changing.
Oh, totally. I don't think that we ever went over the top. We were able to buy a house, and we were able to buy furniture. The furniture we had at that point was we bought it after a hurricane went through Pensacola and it was flood damaged. So that was because again, I mean, we didn't have two nickels to rub together.
Right.
But I mean, I'm a JG in the Navy. They don't pay you a whole ton of money as a JG, and it was absolutely completely life changing. And I think that we still to this day, I mean, the equity that we have in our home now was based on the equity that we put into that first house when we were on Tic Tac Dough. And that was another nice thing that Dan did for us. Dan actually gave us released some of the cash prior to us being done with the show, so that we could buy the house.
Oh, how beautiful is that?
Yeah, it was very, very, very nice of him to do that. And I will say this: my brother, the missionary, he was able to buy a Land Rover and went over in Zaire. And what he would do is, when he came home for furlough, they would, give it to sell it to another missionary, and then they'd use it. And then when they came back, they'd buy it back. And so he was able to do that. I think he bought a kerosene-powered refrigerator, and I think that they got some sort of rudimentary solar thing, but I may be mistaken on that. That might be a little early. But I mean, it was not only a blessing to us, but it was a blessing to him. We donated the organ we won to this small startup church that was near where we lived. So it was it touched a lot of people's lives, quite frankly.
That's so beautiful to hear, right? That your winnings, I mean, you spread them around and they made so many other people happy in addition to you and Jenny. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
But over the years, I mean, that's a heck of a start to have to your married life. And I think, beyond that, I think it also, the whole experience just gave, I think you alluded to this earlier, and I'm sure you felt it when you were on the show. You win something like that, it gives you a confidence boost. Now, I will say, fighter pilots generally don't need a boost of confidence.
Sure. Right.
But it was different. It was different, and I think to a certain extent, I would be lying if I didn't say that I probably carried it through the rest of my life. I mean, I'm 67 now, so I was 25 at the time. I will say this much, and how old are you now? I don't mean to pry, but
No, I am. Well, I got to do the math here. I am 33.
okay. So you at 33 are much closer to me at 25. At 67, the stuff is still there. It's like a slow processor on a computer. It just takes a while to spit it out. And but it's a confidence boost that I'll probably always enjoy.
Sure. Oh, I can relate to that 100%. My freshman year of college, I was lucky enough to make it onto Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I won $15,000. But what was more valuable was just that feeling of being that guy on campus. I recommend it to anybody who's starting college. Get on a game show your first year. You'll be the most popular guy in school for years to come. It is a definite confidence
No,
boost.
I mean, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It just is one of those things where it's a unique experience. It's a unique experience. There's nothing quite like it. I mean, I think I read about the guy who won the $1 billion lottery the other day, and I mean, obviously that talk about a life-changing experience, but it's one of those things where there you just luckily pick the numbers. Maybe you didn't even pick the numbers. They were picked for you. But when you're on the game show, it's a as you know, it's a feeling of accomplishment. And I don't want to say overweening pride, but there's a certain amount of pride in having been able to perform under pressure.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And that body of work as a contestant on the show is something you could always look back on. How often do you YouTube yourself, for example? How often do you see footage of yourself?
Honest to goodness. Well, let me put it this way. I'm looking, if you were in my office right now, I'm looking up at my name tag from the show, my my gold star from the Game Show Hall of Fame, and some pictures of Jenny and me and Wink. And then downstairs in the basement, I've got a huge picture that Wink signed for me. It was at one of the game show conventions, and that hangs on the wall downstairs in by the pool table. So
Wonderful. I was going to ask what kind of memorabilia you bring back from an experience like that, because I'm doing this podcast for the National Archives of Game Show History, and one of the things they're focused on is collecting the materials that make up this sort of world of game shows. So I wonder what elements of the shows you personally own. So you have your name thing from the front of the podium. Is that the name tag you're talking about?
yep, yep.
Oh,
I've
how
got
cool.
So I mean, it's not. I don't want to make it sound like it's. I mean, my office is full of different memorabilia. I've got my diploma. I've got a Navy sword. I've got aircraft pictures. I've also got a little poster from Free Solo that was signed by Alex Honnold, which my son was working at this climbing facility, and he showed up and gave a little talk, and I got Michael to get him to sign that for me, because I always thought that his what he's done is probably the greatest single athletic achievement in history. But I wouldn't trade places with him for for all the tea in China.
Sure.
I don't like heights. But I guess where I'm going with this is I don't want to make it sound like it's the it was one of that's the Pomeranian alarm. Sorry.
That's okay. It's not the crowning achievement. It sounds like there are other things in your life.
I mean, it was one of many. It was one of many. I mean, Jenny and I have had an incredibly blessed life. we've got the 3 boys. It's one of the things I'm thankful for, and it's certainly, as you pointed out, it was a life-changing experience, but it's not anything that I constantly focus on. Let's put it that way.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that, to keep things like that in perspective is important, because there are, it's a lot of people would be upset to hear, but there are things that are more important than game shows out in the world. So it's great to have that sense of perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that others feel the same way. But it was undeniably a tremendous experience.
Tell Us About Yourself, Conversations with Game Show Contestants is hosted, edited, and produced by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Cory Anotado. This has been a production of BuzzerBlog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself, Conversations with Game Show Contestants is produced in partnership with the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. One of the largest history museums in the United States, and one of the leading museums serving families with highly interactive exhibits and programs. Since 1968, the Strong Museum has been dedicated to exploring the ways in which play encourages learning, creativity, and discovery, and how it illuminates cultural history. And their National Archives of Game Show History. Founded by industry veterans Bob Bowden and Howard Blumenthal, the archive is home to thousands of artifacts representing over 80 years of broadcasting, including props, set designs, video interviews with game show professionals, and other iconic elements from the history of television at play. For more information about the National Archives of Game Show History or the Strong National Museum of Play, visit museumofplay.org or call area code 585-263-2700.